Coming to you from behind the craziest socialist lines of the Pacific Northwest, local and national news, talk, and opinions, this is the Behind the Line podcast.
So I, like many others, are following the two people running for the Seattle prosecutor's office. One of them happens to be a Nicole Thomas Kennedy, who is a self-described abolitionist. And if you look at her Twitter feed, you'll find some very controversial tweets directed at the Seattle PD. One of them here, I've got a couple. I lived here for 25 years. I know a good cross-section of this town, and my intel says that Seattle overwhelmingly sees you as a collection of meat-headed leeches who need to go home to their mommies and unlatch from the collective taxpayer teat. She's also got one with a picture of a police car that was burned up by a homeless guy. And it says, and so the officer, quote, discharged his weapon. Cops are so dumb. Put up your window, pig. And this is because the cop had his window down. The guy just walked up and threw some sort of burning object into the car. And another one, just to remind everyone that this little USA come apart is because cops are serial killers and a big chunk of you are serial killer apologists. Enjoy sitting in the mess you made. And this one, a cop's word means nothing. And then I can think of a few people less deserving of the vaccine than cops who openly flouted mask mandates, repeatedly gassed entire neighborhoods, and swept a homeless camp a week before Christmas, all during a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic. Eat some COVID-laced shit and quit your jobs. So I, like many other people, and this is in the news a lot right now, I'm seeing these controversial tweets that Nicole Thomas Kennedy sent out over the last few months. I was a little shocked to see someone running for public office say some of the things she said, so I sent her a message on Facebook asking if she had any comment about it. And quite surprisingly, she responded to me. In her exchange with me, she claimed that she was just calling cops names and that she had been treated badly herself by cops, judges, and prosecutors. She couldn't understand why they got so hurt about the comments. She said she never had to pepper spray anyone and just did her job even when she was being treated badly, inferring that police are pepper spraying people for saying mean things to them. She doesn't seem to or want to understand what police are dealing with on the streets. But reading these tweets, I have screenshots, and this is also on my blog if you'd like to read this article. It seems to be a little more than name-calling. She refers to them as serial killers. She told me that cops kill people all the time. So I looked up the stats from the FBI's website. In 2019, 1,099 people were shot and killed by police in the U.S. And incidents where civilians shot and killed someone in 2019 were 14,400. Considering the volume of calls police respond to, the population of the U.S., and the number of gun-related incidents in the U.S., this number to me seems relatively low. She doesn't take into account police officers being shot at or having to defend themselves. The comment about cops should just eat COVID-laced shit and quit your jobs effectively says she wants them to die. In another tweet I did not include, she said whoever tried to bomb the East Precinct last summer was a hero. Had a bomb gone off, it most certainly would have resulted in people dying or being seriously hurt. Again, a little more than name-calling. Eventually, she told me that she doesn't know, quote, she doesn't know or really think about whether every cop is bad. It's not the person, it's the system, end quote. And while I agree the system has many flaws, a person running for prosecutor should be thinking about individuals in these cases, what the circumstances are for each case, and any and all reasonable and legal outcomes of these cases, that lawful procedures were followed and adhered to. As a city prosecutor, she would not be dealing with felonies, but it shows a lack of critical thinking and ability to analyze cases involving law enforcement if she lumps them all into the system. She also shows a real lack of empathy for victims of crime. She also supports defunding the police, but stated it is not an overnight process. She said it's gradual and the money divested from police budgets could be reallocated into the community. She stated that it's not supposed to be bad cop, no donut type punishment, but a recognition that despite billions and billions of dollars that we have spent on policing and prison, we are far from the safest country in the world. We can do better than this. And in some ways, I agree with her on that. It's not working. I was a police officer for 9 years. I worked as a field training officer during that time, training new officers. I also owned a bail bonds business for 8 years and worked as a fugitive recovery agent for 16 years. I owned a private investigations business for 5 years and worked as a defense investigator in 2 different county courts. The legal system is a revolving door for many people. As an officer and a bondsman, I got to know many people I arrested or bailed out over and over. People who didn't have money were often more negatively impacted because they could not afford a lawyer, could not afford the fines, and could not afford to pay for bail. Failing to pay fines would often land them back in jail, and failure to pay fines often meant no driver's license to go to work if they wanted to. So it is a circle. But what are we going to reallocate funds to? Because talking doesn't work either. And criminals will almost always tell you whatever you want to hear or agree to almost anything to get out of jail time. And all it is talk. They will be right back to their criminal behavior almost immediately. Progressives like this always have grand ideas about community programs with no concrete plans or evidence of effectiveness. She also never made any mention whatsoever about victims of crimes and how this would affect them. Her comments to me were almost as if all misdemeanor crime is property crime and not crimes against people. To make a population feel safe, they need to know there is some form of justice or consequence for illegal behavior. NTK told me she did not want to disband the prosecutor's office, and quote, but I guess I can see how people might jump to that, end quote, she said. I don't want to prosecute petty crime, crimes of poverty, like stealing a sandwich or socks. It's an absurd waste of an obscene amount of money and does nothing to make victims whole or prevent it from happening again. Just because people are in need does not mean they should be allowed to steal from others. And this is me talking now. While I do somewhat agree that if someone is truly hungry, they shouldn't be locked up for trying to eat, you also can't expect stores and citizens to take the hit. And there are plenty of crimes that are misdemeanors that should be prosecuted. Crimes like theft, ID theft, trespassing, certain kinds of assault, voyeurism, failure to register as a kidnapping offender, disorderly conduct, many driving offenses, and these are just to name a few. I guess my question is, if she's not planning to disband the prosecutor's office, but at the same time doesn't want to prosecute what she considers petty crime, what would she be doing as a prosecutor? I asked her twice what her plan was specifically for prosecuting criminals, and she did not answer that question. This leads me to believe she literally will not prosecute anyone because she feels it's a waste of money and time. I think if people know they are actually facing jail time, it is a deterrent. Criminal behavior is learned, and it's very difficult to unlearn. There are many factors that can lead a person to a criminal life: their home life, their friends and peers, lack of education, lack of a job, lack of housing, you name it. So what is the answer to change behavior? Personally, I don't know. Educating young people to do the right thing, how to behave in a civilized society, seems like a good place to start. Supporting families and making sure they know how to meet their needs. But a city where kids and adults know there's no consequences for negative or illegal behavior? Really? I asked her what her ideas were to change this, and all she told me was her website would be updated the following day with her specific plans. It's now been several days since we spoke and still no update. Again, progressives like this always have grand plans for society, but nothing seemingly concrete on how to make a real difference. Just a lot of expensive ideas for community organizations that never seem to bring about any real change. She went on to tell me that during the Summer of Love protests, cops gassed her neighborhood for 10 nights in a row. She had to buy a gas mask for her 9-year-old in case the gas got into the house. As a parent, I can empathize with her anger in this regard, although I don't recall SPD gassing entire neighborhoods for 10 nights. She also apparently does not hold the prosecutors or protesters accountable, and apparently they should have been able to run wild. She was upset that the police abandoned the East Precinct and would not explain to her why that was done or who ordered it. I'm not entirely sure why she cared if they left the area if she dislikes them so much. She talked about them pepper spraying a kid in the face at another protest. And yes, a kid was pepper sprayed during a protest, but it wasn't an officer standing in front of the kid spraying it in the face. Pepper spray tends to float through the air in the area where it's discharged. So the real question to me that begs to be answered is, why are you, as a parent, bringing your child to a protest, especially when those protests at the time were often violent? No accountability for the parents, though. She said there was no accountability with SPD for that incident, when in fact it was one of the things that led the city council to severely limiting the non-lethal tools SPD can use against people. So by her reasoning, wouldn't that be some accountability? She also stated SPD never apologized for doing it. Did any protesters ever apologize for all the tens of thousands of dollars of damage they inflicted on people's businesses downtown? Did any protesters ever apologize for assaulting police or the 2 kids that were murdered at the Chop Zone? Was there any accountability for all that? She complained to me about the hate messages she gets on Facebook and Twitter every day. Hate, racist comments, and threats of violence. She said that lies are being told about her and her mission on parody accounts on social media. It's interesting that this bothers her when it's no different than what she's doing to the police. And she stated earlier that she was treated badly and still did her job. SPD officers are also still doing their jobs, as much as the city will allow, anyway. She stated that people were trying to make her home address public. Well, being in a position like this, you're going to draw all kinds of support and hate, and I suppose that comes with the territory. I guess I don't understand why people get so bent about other people's opinions, and whether I or anyone else agrees with her or not, she is entitled to her opinion. She should be able to speak her opinion without fear of violence. What happened to the America where we could agree to disagree and walk away? If you don't like what she is saying or don't agree with her or feel it's right for the city, then you can express your opinion at the ballot box, and that should be the only place you express your will in that regard. I do appreciate her responding to my question and taking the time to message me. I don't personally agree with her approach. She was a defense lawyer for 4 years, and then she started her own law firm and did pro bono work during the protests of 2020, helping protesters who got arrested. I could not find any information on whether she was a lawyer before this or what she did before that. 4 or 5 years is really not that long. She seemingly has no understanding of law enforcement or what police officers encounter on a day-to-day basis. She believes they're all serial killers, who I guess are just looking for their next victim. She claims to have never lost a case on her website as a defense lawyer, which, based on our current prosecutor's office, would not be too unbelievable. The prosecutor's office should be working in conjunction with the police department. Under the current leadership, it doesn't. And if NTK is elected, it most definitely will not. Crime is already soaring in this city, and we need answers. We need a prosecutor that will do the job, make tough decisions, examine each case, and provide justice to victims. It's not an office that serves criminals. It's an office that should serve the victims and seek justice. It's an office that should follow the laws of the city of Seattle and the state of Washington. Prosecutors have a duty to uphold those laws. Well, I had offered to interview her on the podcast. I was hoping she'd come on here and talk to me, but she stopped responding to me after I asked her about that. So I think it's clear where she stands and where she'll take this office and the city in what direction if she gets elected. So you need to think very carefully about who gets this office. The last two governors of the state of Washington are endorsing the other candidate. They both said, that NTK is basically standing for anarchy, so which wouldn't be far from the truth. Anyway, I appreciate you listening, and you can catch us at behindthelinepodcast.com. Thanks. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Behind the Line podcast at behindthelinepodcast.com. If you liked this, I hope you will like, share, and subscribe to our channel. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook at Behind the Line WA. You can find us on Twitter at Behind WA. You can also find us on Telegram and LinkedIn at Behind the Line. And I'm on Rumble. Thanks again for listening, and I appreciate your support.